Hi everyone, my name is Chemo. I'm 28 years old, and 3 years ago I was diagnosed with a skull base and neck cancer called paraganglioma. At the time I was 25 years old, and when the doctors told me that I had cancer, I was just in shock. My heart sank, and there was just so many questions, doubts, and fears running through my mind of what laid ahead for me. I had so many questions about this diagnosis. The doctors told me that it was considered a rare disease, and it was considered 1 in a million people get diagnosed with these types of tumors. My world just turned upside down, and my life changed since that day. So today I want to share with you all my journey battling cancer, the ups, the lows, and the struggles that I faced, the treatments that I went through, the surgeries that I had, hoping that, if you've been diagnosed with cancer or with this rare disease called paraganglioma or pheochromocytoma, or any other chronic illness, or you have a loved one that's been diagnosed, I hope that my video, my story, can bring some peace. It can answer some questions that you may be having, and can give you some hope. Hope that, cancer doesn't have to be a death sentence. This doesn't have to be the end for you. And that there is hope and there is light in the midst of all this darkness and this scary disease. So I'll start off by saying that, talking to you about my symptoms. I started having symptoms, I would say 4 years ago, around 2017. I was working at a high-paced, stressful job, and I had been 2 years out of college, so I was focusing on my career, on my profession, and I wasn't really focusing on my health. So I started getting sick more often. I was constantly tired. All I wanted to do was just go to work, come home, and sleep. I had also constant cough that just wouldn't go away. I took over-the-counter medicine, and the symptoms were alleviated for a few weeks, but then they would come back. Fast forward, a few months down the road, in January of 2018, I was sick, and one day suddenly I just lost hearing in my right ear. I was actually driving home from work, and when I went to go pick up the phone, I realized that I couldn't hear from my right ear. That's when I immediately grew concerned and made an appointment to go see my primary doctor. I went to go see the primary doctor. They observed me, they analyzed me, but because I'm young, and not just the doctors, but myself, I thought, this is just a simple cold, nothing to worry about. They gave me oral steroids for a week, but unfortunately, after that 1 week, my hearing still didn't come back, and I still kept coughing persistently. So I was referred to an ENT doctor. That's a ear, nose, and throat doctor. I went to the appointment a month later, a few weeks later, and this was February 2018. I go to my appointment with the ENT, and they do a hearing test. Unfortunately, after the hearing test, the ENT doctor sat down with me and told me that I had complete deafness in my right ear. I was just in shock, and I asked him, what caused this? What can I do? Is there something to fix this? How can I fix this? So he told me that he would have to run a few more tests. They ran blood work. They checked my ear to see if there's any wax or fluid backed up in there, and everything was clear. There was no wax, no fluid. My blood work came back, everything normal. So he requested that I get an MRI scan done of my brain, just to see if there was anything internally obstructing, their ear canal or affecting the ear that could have possibly caused the deafness in my right ear. So I go and get my MRI test done. During the MRI scan, it was my first MRI scan ever, and during the MRI scan they inject a contrast, which is to help them see the images more clear. During the MRI scan, I actually, after they injected the contrast, I threw up immediately and broke out in hives. So I was allergic to the contrast. They were able to bring somebody in, inject me with Benadryl, and thankfully I was able to complete the MRI successfully. I just went home and I kept thinking, like, what is happening with me? I'm constantly getting sick. I lose my hearing. Now I throw up at this MRI scan. Like, what's happening with my body? And I just felt like something was wrong. So, I prayed and I asked God to heal me, to restore my hearing. And then I went to go see the ENT doctor. He went over the MRI results with me, and he said that everything looked normal, that there wasn't any masses, no tumors, no lesions, nothing obstructing my ear. So he concluded that, since everything came back clear and normal, he concluded that my sudden hearing loss was caused by a poorly treated cold or infection. And I was just like I felt so hopeless in that moment, because I just thought, oh, it's my fault. I caused this. Maybe I should have taken care of my health sooner. Maybe I should have taken care of that cold sooner and not let it prolong for, as long as I did. And I just, I went home feeling just like sorry and feeling like defeated and mad at myself for, not taking action sooner. I asked the ENT doctor, is there anything else that I can do, to fix this, to get my hearing back? So he actually recommended me to go see another ENT doctor. I went to go see this other ENT doctor, and this doctor recommended ear injections to my ear. He completed 3 injections of steroids directly in my ear, and the injections were painful, but I was able to do them, complete the 3 injections. He did warn me that there was only a 50-50 chance that the injections would work. But with nothing to lose, and I just wanted my hearing back, I said yes, and I completed the injections. Unfortunately, after completing the 3 injections, in the course of 3 months, my hearing still didn't come back. And in that moment in my life, I was just like feeling very frustrated at myself, very sad, very angry for everything that was happening in my life. I felt like stressed out at work, and then now having to deal with health issues, and I just broke down crying, and I begged God and asked him to heal me, to restore my hearing. And I had faith, and if I prayed, God would listen, and I kept praying. But unfortunately, there's still a long journey for me ahead. So I went home and, you know, went about my day, went back to work. But I'm thankful for my mom and my husband. They're the ones that actually motivated me to go seek a third opinion. So I made an appointment to see another ENT doctor, and this ENT doctor reviewed all my history. I told him everything that had happened, and he told me that, you know, there was this surgery called the middle ear surgery, and it's a surgery that they do where they basically poke a hole through your ear canal, or lift the ear canal, and then see if there's anything obstructing that didn't show up in the scans, and then inject the inner ear with steroids. So, you know, he also told me that it was a 50-50 chance that this surgery would work. With nothing to lose, I went ahead with the surgery. The surgery was inpatient surgery, or outpatient surgery, yeah. So, you know, I arrived in the morning. The surgery only took, I think, like 2-3 hours, and then I was out that same day. I went home. I was feeling hopeful, and I, you know, really thought that this would work. Unfortunately, you know, a month later, they did a hearing test, and my hearing still didn't come back. You know, at this point, I just felt so defeated, and, you know, I cried out to God, and I just felt so defeated because I had tried everything. You know, I had, you know, done the injections and the MRIs and this, and I just, you know, nothing was working. And nobody can give me an explanation as to what was happening with me. You know, I just kept getting dismissed for a regular cold. I also told that ENT that I was feeling a constant cough, and I was having that chronic cough, and sometimes I would even run out of breath, and it felt like I was having an asthma attack. So I was referred to a lung doctor, a pulmonologist. The lung doctor did a series of tests, blood work, and he found everything looked fine. You know, my breathing levels were a little low, but aside from that, everything else looked fine. They sent me allergy medicine, an inhaler. They did an allergy test. It came back that I was allergic to mold, and I had environmental allergies. So my symptoms of a cough, shortness of breath, those were all explained for, they were all dismissed for allergies. So, you know, I just, you know, I blame myself. I blame myself for weeks, for months, on what was happening. I thought that it was, you know, my fault, that I should have taken care of my health sooner. A few months passed by, and the next plan for me was to get fitted for hearing aids. As I was waiting to get fitted for hearing aids, now it's January 2019, a year later, after losing my hearing, and I start feeling, you know, new symptoms. Aside from the cough attack, now, you know, I start feeling like a fast heart rate, and mid-January, I started having double vision. It started off where it was just seconds of double vision, and then it would randomly go away. I noticed when I was at work in front of a computer, talking to people, driving home, and it just started getting, as the weeks went by, it started getting worse and worse. My eye really started bothering me. It just felt really dry. So this time I said, you know, I'm not going to wait as long as I waited. I don't want to lose my eyesight the same way I lost my hearing. And I went to go see an eye doctor. I went to the optometrist. The optometrist checked my vision, and he said that everything looked good, my vision was stable, but he did say that he noticed that my right ear was jumping. Every time I looked like to the sides, it would jump. So he said, you should really get that checked out, and referred me to a neuro-ophthalmologist, which is like a eye doctor, but they specialize more in like internal problems that cause vision problems. So I called the doctor that he referred me to, but they didn't have an appointment until 3 months later. So I waited, and my vision just got worse. I had a trip planned to go to Colombia to see my family in February, and so I took the trip. I flew to Colombia. When I was in Colombia, I noticed that my vision just started getting worse. It was bothering me more. The double vision was actually lasting longer than just a few seconds. So my cousin, that's a doctor in Colombia, I told her what was happening, and she immediately took me to go see a neuro-ophthalmologist in Colombia. I went to go see the doctor. She checked my vision, noticed that my eye was jumping, noticed that I was having double vision, and immediately referred me and told me that once I got back home here to Miami, Florida, to go to Bascom Palmer and get checked out as soon as possible, because she thought that my vision was associated with my hearing loss. So that's exactly what I did. I was in Colombia only for, I believe, a week and a half. I came back and Sunday, and that Monday I went to the emergency hospital at Bascom Palmer. I went to, as I waited there, my vision was just like bothering me a lot. At this point, my eye was like cockeyed. It was, moving inward. And, I was just like, I was scared, but I kept praying, and I kept just telling myself everything's going to be fine. There's nothing to worry about. That night at the hospital, they did another MRI scan of my brain, and they sent me home that night. They told me that they didn't find anything in the MRI, that it was probably stress. I had heard that from the other ENTs, and now this doctor at the hospital mentioning or dismissing my eye problem due to stress. I felt so frustrated. I felt, I'm like, how can it possibly be stress? I was just in Colombia spending time with family. I wasn't stressed. And I was just like, so many questions that I had, and confusion. So I went home. They sent me home with a patch on my eye, and I went home, feeling defeated, hopeless. And the next morning, I actually asked my husband to drive me to work because I didn't feel comfortable driving, with the patch over my eye. He drove me to work, and, I'm at work, and at work, I see my phone, and I see that I have several missed calls from the hospital. I called them back immediately, and the doctor from the hospital tells me, Sheila, we need you to come back as soon as possible. We found something positive in your scans, and we need to do further testing. My heart just sank. I was like, okay, I need to go right now. And I think I was just in shock because I stopped everything that I was doing at work, called my husband right away. He arrived 10 minutes later, and we drove to the hospital. On the drive to the hospital, when I think about it, it just like seems like a blur to me. And I think because I was just in so much shock. but also I kept telling myself, you know, it's gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay, there's nothing to worry about, it's not gonna be anything big, it's gonna be okay, nothing the doctors can't fix. But as I think back on that moment, and that drive to the hospital just was like a blur to me. I don't really remember much of it. I arrived at the hospital with my husband, and the doctor there told me, you know, we found a tumor at the base of your skull, but we need to admit you into the hospital to see what type of tumor it is, and because we just need to see, like, find out more information as to what's happening. So, you know, I reached over and grabbed my husband's hand, and, you know, he told me it's gonna be okay. And, you know, it's just nice to have that support there with me as I got this diagnosis. And I just felt, you know, it's gonna be okay. And I also felt a sense of relief, you know, relief because it had already been a whole year of being in doctor's appointments, of tests, of scans, and not getting an explanation for my symptoms, or my symptoms getting dismissed for allergies, or a common cold. So I just felt like I felt relief because I knew that something was wrong with my body. So I got admitted into the hospital. I was admitted into the hospital for 3 days. In the matter of those 3 days, they ran a bunch more blood work. They ran MRI of my brain, neck, full body scans. And I was seen by, I think, 10 to 15 doctors would come in and, you know, check me. And, you know, some doctors will refer to the tumor as a glomus vagal tumor. Some other doctors refer to it as a glomus jugular tumor. Some other ones mentioned it was a carotid body tumor. So I can see, you know, as more and more doctors came, and each one gave me like different names, and you know, I can see my frustration in my family's face and the fear that they had, because, you know, even the doctors were trying to find out, like, what exactly, you know, what type of tumor did I exactly have. So, you know, it was a very overwhelming experience, and, you know, at that moment I started noticing, okay, this is more severe than what I think it is. You know, this is bigger than what I thought. So after the 3 days, the doctors come back and they conclude that I have a large tumor sitting at the base of my skull, extending into my brain and all the way down to my carotid artery, my neck. They tell me that the tumor is wrapped around several of the cranial nerves, and it's also wrapped around the carotid artery. They tell me that, you know, this is what caused my hearing loss, and this was what was causing my double vision. You know, I was also, before getting diagnosed, and I didn't mention it earlier, but before getting diagnosed, on top of the double vision, I was also having a fast heart rate, like resting heart rate. So just sitting here, my heart rate would be at like 110, which is really fast. Usually that's the heart rate for somebody that's on a, you know, bike, or exercising. And the other symptom that I had was also, I was having a lot of headaches and brain saps, like sudden, like it just felt like an electric shock that would go like through my head. So they told me that, this tumor was causing all these symptoms, and that because of the location of where it was at, the best thing for them to do was to do surgery, just because of, all the symptoms that it was causing. But because of the location of the tumor, since all that area of the brain and neck is very, tight and small, they told me that the surgery would be very risky, that it would take a team of doctors to successfully complete the surgery, and that it would be a long surgery and a very complicated surgery. So I just said, okay, if this is what the doctors are telling me, this is what you suggest, let's move forward with surgery. But they told me it wasn't that easy, that I had to prepare for surgery, that I had to see many doctors before going into surgery. So I was discharged from the hospital, and this was February. I was diagnosed February 19 of 2019. Discharged from the hospital a few days later, and I spent 2 months preparing for surgery. During these 2 months, I saw a endocrinologist. So an endocrinologist, basically what he did was run blood work, but a more complex and comprehensive blood work that can say if the tumor is releasing adrenaline. So I found out that this type of tumor that I have, paragangliomas and pheochromocytomas, they release adrenaline, which causes a person to constantly feel anxious, or sometimes have like high blood pressure, or also makes the body go into that flight or fight response, which is not good, to be in that state of mind all the time. So before going into surgery, they needed to make sure that my blood pressure was stable, that my heart was in conditions to sustain this long surgery, and that this tumor was not releasing adrenaline. So I saw the endocrinologist. He did blood work. Thankfully, my tumor does not release adrenaline, but I know that many other people that are diagnosed with this tumor, it does. Many of these tumors release adrenaline into the bloodstream, but mine doesn't. So I also saw a cardiologist to check my heart, because since I had a fast heart rate, they wanted to make sure that my heart was strong enough for surgery. And I saw the 3 teams of doctors that were going to be doing the surgery. I had head and neck surgeon, a ENT surgeon, and a neurosurgeon. So my surgery consisted of 3 surgeons. So I met with each one before surgery. They explained to me, this diagnosis. Each one of them told me that this was a rare disease, and that they had only seen about 2 other cases in their lifetime, or in their experience, 10 years or 20 years of experience working as doctors. So, it was scary. It was scary, especially when doctors are telling you that this is rare, and that, it's not very common. It was scary. It was scary for my family, for my friends, for me. But I'm actually thankful to, the doctors that I had, because they explained to me everything in detail. They explained to me what was going to happen during surgery. they explained to me the possible risk associated with surgery and the possible consequences I could have after surgery. So, even though it was hard to hear, I'm glad that they were direct and honest with me. And, I think it gave me more peace of mind to know what I was like walking into. But at the same time, it also, I think it also gave me a little bit of fear because I knew how complex and how risky the surgery would be. So I prepared for 2 months for surgery, and on April 22nd of 2019, I had my first surgery called the Embolization Surgery. During the surgery, basically what they do is that they put catheters through your veins right here. I think some doctors also do it through right here, the veins right here. And I had that surgery. It went successful. And the purpose of that surgery was to basically go all the way up to where the tumor is located, see where it was originating from, and cut the blood flow of the tumor, so that the next day when the surgeons cut open, my neck and head, it wouldn't be as messy or as bloody, or I wouldn't lose as much blood. So, the first surgery lasted 5 hours, I believe, and it was a success. They were able to stop the blood flow of the tumor. The other goal that they had with the embolization surgery was to see if my carotid artery could be sacrificed. Just because the tumor is wrapped around, the carotid artery, and while they were removing the tumor, if they needed to remove the carotid artery, they wanted to see if that could be an option. But unfortunately, during the embolization surgery, the doctor said it's too risky, and he suggested not to sacrifice the carotid artery. All right, so after the first surgery was done, I woke up, I saw my family around me, and then they began to prepare me for the second surgery, which was a major surgery. That surgery started April 23rd, 2019, early in the morning, and ended on April 24th, 2019 at around 3 in the morning. The surgery lasted around 18 hours. I prayed, and I knew how complex and how risky the surgery was, so I just prayed to God, and I told my family, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay, there's nothing to worry about. And then as I was getting rolled into the operating room and I waved goodbye to my family, kissed them, I just started crying. I started crying, and I didn't know if I would survive the surgery. And that uncertainty was scary. That uncertainty to not know, and to feel like, there's, at this point, there's nothing that I can do except just have faith and pray. So, even the nurse that was rolling me into the operating room, I remember him telling me, it's okay, you're in good hands, there's nothing to be scared or worried about. And, it just reminded me it's true. I had a good team of surgeons, nurses, I was in a good hospital. And, you know, and I just, in that moment, I just closed my eyes and I prayed and I said, you know, God, I have faith. I have faith that you're going to get me through this and that you're going to guide this surgery and that I'm going to come out alive on the other side. So I, you know, just closed my eyes. I saw when they were putting the IVs in my arms, my legs, my feet, you know, strapping me down, preparing me for surgery. And then, you know, I was out. The surgery lasted 18 hours, as I mentioned. And, you know, my family was outside during these 18 hours. And, you know, I had my friends, my family, my husband, all together just waiting. The first surgeon was the head and neck surgeon. He performed the throat area. That's where he specialized in during surgery. Let me get closer to the camera. So the head and neck surgeon started the surgery. He focused on the throat, the swallowing nerves, all this area of the throat, the carotid artery, and trying to remove as much as he could, as much tumor as he could, without, you know, affecting the carotid artery and all these other nerves. Once he was done, he went out, told my family that, you know, he was completed, his part was done. Then the second part was the ENT surgeon, and he specialized in this area behind my ear. So behind my ear, right there. And he specialized in that area behind my ear. And then the surgery ended with the neurosurgeon, and he focused on everything that was at the base of the skull, all the tumor that was around cranial nerves, and then he tried to follow the tumor as much as he could until there was a part where he said it was too risky to operate on. So, you know, the surgery was a success, thank God. And I did lose some blood during the surgery, so I had to get a blood transfusion. But aside from that, I didn't have any major complications. My heart rate was stable, my blood pressure, you know, everything was stable. So I'm just, you know, I was so grateful. The next day, I was in ICU for, I believe, 3 days. I actually woke up the next day after surgery, which, you know, was a miracle. Doctors expected that I'd probably be out for longer. And so the next day I woke up, they took out the tube from my mouth since I was intubated. And you know, I was, you know, waking up and in so much pain. The scar, actually, you can't see it now because my hair has grown, but it's actually a C-shaped scar. So it's like from, I think, right here, and it goes like that, like a C shape. So I had, you know, that scar. When I woke up from surgery, I was just so grateful, so thankful to be alive, for, you know, God giving me this other second chance to live. And, you know, I was so full of like gratitude, and I was just so happy, you know, to have survived such a complicated surgery. So, you know, I was feeling great, but then a few moments after waking up, I had a lot of saliva accumulating in my throat. So I had to get the saliva suction, and I was so weak, I couldn't even do it on my own. I had to The nurses had to do it, my husband, my mom, my sister, my family that was there in ICU. They had to like have a suction machine next in my mouth to suction out the saliva. And that's because during the surgery, my swallowing nerve was affected. So I was having trouble swallowing, which was causing me to choke on my own saliva. So they had to suction it, take the saliva out of my mouth for me. My neck was very weak. And, after 2 days of being in ICU, I was transferred over to regular floor in the hospital. During my time there, recovering after surgery, I basically had facial paralysis on the right side of my face. I also, one of the, consequences that I had from, some of the consequences that I had from surgery was facial paralysis on the right side of my face, difficulty swallowing. I also, had a lot of pain, obviously, on this side of my head, neck, and shoulder. At first, I couldn't lift up my arm more than like here, so I couldn't lift up my arm up here. Thankfully, today I can, but I couldn't lift up my arm, and I couldn't lift up my neck on my own. It felt very like weak. I couldn't speak more than like 3-4 words at a time. I just felt so tired, and my voice was very low. My vocal cords were affected. My right vocal cord was paralyzed, so it was affected. And my tongue also is deviated to the right, like this. So those were some of the side effects I had, or consequences that I had after surgery. But I was just, so happy to be alive that, at the moment, these things just seem like secondary and not as important. I was seen by physical therapists, speech therapists, swallowing therapists, and occupational therapists. Basically, they told me that I had to relearn to do everything again. I had to relearn how to swallow, eat, talk, gain my endurance back. And, unfortunately, 5 days later, I was mistakenly discharged from the hospital. There was a miscommunication between the doctors and the nurses and the medical staff, and I was discharged 5 days later after my brain surgery. I went home with an NG tube. So because I couldn't eat or swallow anything, they placed an NG tube, which is a feeding tube, through my nose, and it goes down to your stomach. And that's how they were feeding me through a machine. The food was, being dropped very slowly through the tube. So I went home, I was just so happy to be going home, and I'm like, I made it, I survived, I'm going home. I was just so happy. But unfortunately, when I got home, just the moment I got to the car, I at the time I couldn't walk. I had to be in a wheelchair because I was just so like weak and fatigued. And so I was even very nauseous on my ride home. When I got home, my health started deteriorating. Every time my family tried to feed me through the NG tube, I felt pressure on my chest. So, my family got very concerned, and they took me back to the hospital 2 days later. So I was admitted back into the hospital, and I think this is when I faced a very challenging time with, dealing with the health system. And, it was a very difficult moment for my family and I. And I'm hoping that as I share my story with you all, this doesn't happen to anybody. But basically, I went back to the hospital. I had a fever. I wasn't doing good. My vitals were really low. Let me give me a second. So yeah, my vitals were really low. And, as I was there in the hospital, my husband, my sister and I had family and friends, basically advocating for me because I couldn't speak for myself. The hospital was trying to, or the insurance, the plan was for after surgery for me to go to intensive rehab center to get like intensive therapy, speech therapy, swallowing therapy. But because I was mistakenly discharged, when I came back, the insurance didn't want to cover for my rehab and my therapy. So, I'm so grateful for my husband, my sister, and just all the families, our family members and friends that really push and like advocating for me during this moment in my life. They spoke to social workers, they spoke to the insurance, and after a few, I would say a week and a half of advocating and pushing and trying to get me to a rehab center, thankfully I was transferred over to a rehab center. At the rehab center, I remember the first day of the rehab center, they made me try to put on my socks, or even brush my own hair. And, I was so weak that I couldn't do that. I couldn't do just the simple, minimal things, like brushing my hair, bathing myself, dressing myself. So, I just had to start all over again. And I was in rehab for about a month. The NG tube was actually removed 2 weeks later. I started, after the NG tube was removed, I started on liquid diet. I was having intensive therapy. And then, this is May. And then, a few weeks later, I meet with the surgeons to go over the pathology tests. They tell me that, it's cancerous, that, the tumor started at the base of my skull, but it had metastasized to like my neck, the carotid area, and even though it's a slow growing tumor, which is great, they said that, that it's cancer and that it was in my lymph nodes and that I needed to start treatment, chemotherapy, and radiation as soon as possible. So, at the time, I knew this was a possibility, but I just felt like I haven't even fully recovered from my surgery. I'm still having difficulty walking on my own. I'm still, needing assistance from my husband and my mom and my family. And I just felt like I just faced one battle and overcame that. And now I needed to face another battle. So it was just a lot, but I'm just so grateful to God for giving me that strength and that peace, to be able to fight when I just felt like I had no strength in me. So I prepared for chemo and radiation. They told me that based on the tumor, everything, I saw a radiation oncologist and a chemo oncologist. The radiation oncologist told me that I needed to get 33 rounds of radiation. Wait a second. So he told me that I needed to get 33 rounds of radiation, and that, you know, it was going to be a long journey. It was going to be radiation every single day, Monday through Friday, for 33, days. And, he told me that radiation was not easy. Told me all the side effects that I would get from radiation. So my skin would be burned, fatigue, mouth dryness, pain. And then I saw the chemo oncologist. And the plan was to do the 33 rounds of radiation and do 2 weeks of chemo, using the drugs cisplatin and etoposide, and it would be 2 full weeks every single day. So it would be like 7 days, everyday chemo. The first day 8 hours, and the last day 8 hours, and then every day in between, it would be like 4 hours. So it's just a lot of medical terminology. My life just became being at doctor's appointments and hospitals and this diagnosis. So before starting chemo and radiation, I started looking online, trying to get prepared, and I came across an article that said that chemo can affect fertility. So I spoke to the oncologist, and he told me that yes, that there is a chance that chemo would affect my fertility. So he referred me to see a fertility doctor before starting my chemo and my treatment. So I went to go see the fertility doctor. My husband and I both went. We saw the fertility doctor, and they basically told us, we can explain to us the difference between like freezing eggs, freezing embryos, and told us we can do this process, but we need to do it right now because we can't prolong for you to start your treatment. So it needs to be done right now. And so I was scheduled for the IVF process immediately. I started the injections for IVF, and they also told us that this whole process cost about $15,000. We didn't have that money. We just didn't have that money. The little bit of money that we had saved up, we had used it already with, my surgery, my medical expenses. So, I cried, and I'm like, not only do I now have cancer and I have to deal with this, now, there's a possibility that I won't be able to have kids in the future. And that thought just crushed me. So I looked over at my husband and I said, I want to do this. I need to do this. I want to reserve my eggs so I can have kids later on. So, he supported me, and also the hospital notified us of a scholarship that gave me a discount called Live Strong Foundation. So I did that, and everything ended up turning out to be like 11,000. So it was a lot less, you know, we're saving discounted from 15, 20 to 11,000. So we did the IVF process. You know, I had surgery to extract my eggs. We did the IVF process, we completed it, and then this was in late June, and then in early July, I got ready to start my chemo and my radiation treatment. July, I had a PICC line inserted in my arm. So usually before getting chemo, you either have to have a PICC line or a port placed, so that's where they can put the medications through. So I had a PICC line because, you know, my chemo would only be 2 weeks long, so they believed that, you know, PICC line was necessary instead of a port. So I had a PICC line placed, and then I started my radiation. The first day of radiation, you know, the actual radiation only took 15 minutes long, and they fitted me for a mask. And so they fit you for a mask, and they laid me down, and they put the mask really tight. And, you know, it's 15 minutes of the radiation machine hitting, you know, this whole area of my neck and skull base. So I started radiation, and the first day after radiation, I went home, and I just had like excruciating like jaw pain. You know, I was like screaming, crying of the pain. Thankfully, they sent me medications. They sent me gabapentin for nerve pain, and that helped. And you know, I continued going to radiation. My husband and my mom took time off from work. They took turns. My husband would take me in the morning, and then my mom would stay with me in the afternoons. So I'm just so grateful for them, because, you know, none of this would have been possible without them. And just everything that they sacrificed for me, and just, you know, stopping their lives to be there for me and to take me to treatment because I couldn't even drive. So they took me to treatment, and then a few days before starting my chemo, I knew that chemo would cause hair loss. So I decided to cut my hair. I didn't shave it. And I think that maybe it was a little difficult for me just to like shave it completely. But I didn't want to take action before I fell, because I knew it was coming. So before starting my chemo, I asked, you know, my sister, my mom, and my husband to basically cut my hair really short. So I had a boy cut, and I donated my hair. So I cut my hair really short, and, you know, it felt freeing. It felt freeing to be able to, I guess, take control and do something. Because I knew that, you know, I was going to lose my hair. So I'm like, you know what, let me turn this pain into something positive, and donate my hair. So I donated my hair, I cut my hair, and, you know, this part of my head was already shaved from surgery. So I started chemo in July, mid-July, started chemo. The first few days of chemo were going well, and then my health just started deteriorating. I felt very nauseous, constipated, very weak. I had mouth sores all over my mouth. The PICC line was getting infected, so it was like all red around the PICC line. And at this point, it was just getting harder and harder to eat. The pain around my throat because of the radiation, my whole neck was burned, my skin was dark, and the mouth sores were just like so painful. My mouth felt really dry, and it just felt harder and harder to eat and swallow anything. So, you know, I started eating less. My family started making me, I had progressed to eating soft foods, and then after chemo, after a few days of chemo, I kind of went back to just having liquids. My taste buds were like completely changed. Everything tasted like metal. Things like salt and pepper were just like too spicy for me. And just like, you know, everything, my mouth is very sensitive, and I just felt very weak. So early August, you know, I started, my hair started falling. And then early August, it was just becoming harder and harder to make it to my treatment. And I remember like, just like you know, it had been, I think, 3 weeks since starting radiation and a week after my chemo. And, you know, it was just so much harder to even get out of bed and get dressed. So I was able to make it. I don't even know how, but I was able to make it to my treatment center. And after they finished that radiation, this was early August, after they finished the radiation, I immediately threw up. I was choking, just feeling so weak, didn't even have energy to talk, and I had to be placed in a wheelchair because I couldn't even walk. So I saw my radiation oncologist, and he saw me and he's like, "You're not looking good," and he calls over the hospital and he sent me to the hospital, and he said, "You know, you don't look good. I'm sending you over to the hospital for failure to thrive." And I just heard those words, and like I started crying because, you know, I just wanted this to be over with. I was just so tired of fighting, you know, fighting through surgery and the recovery process, and now fighting through treatment and chemo, and, you know, and I was just like, I fought so much, you know, and I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail. I want to be strong, but it just, you know, inside it just felt like weak and just ready to give up. And I cried, and, you know, so as I was getting wheeled to the hospital, you know, one of the nurses approached me, and she saw me crying, and she said, you know, "I'm going to share this with you. I'm also a cancer survivor. I had like throat cancer, and I know it's not easy, but I want you to know that you're strong and you will get through this." And, you know, it just felt like an angel sent from God, from heaven, because it's exactly what I needed in that moment. And just her words, seeing that you know, she had survived this, that she had gotten through it, it just, you know, reassured to me that I needed to keep pushing, I needed to keep fighting, and that I could get through it too. So I was admitted to the hospital. So I was admitted into the hospital, and You know, at this point, I just felt so bad, so sick. After the chemo, we continued radiation. I was admitted, we continued radiation in the hospital. My PICC line was removed just because the whole area around it was red. So it was removed, and they placed another line. I think it's called the Met line. Yeah, they placed another line in the other arm. And, you know, I continued my radiations from the hospital. I finished my radiation. My whole hair fell at the hospital, so I just asked my mom to, you know, shave off my head, the remainder of the hair that I had. I shaved my head at the hospital, and, you know, I think I celebrated my birthday. It was my 26th birthday at the hospital. I had family and friends come over, and, you know, it's just nice to have all that love and support. And, you know, it's what kept me going. And so I continue with radiation, and then a few days after my birthday, August 21st, I believe, at this point I was barely eating, so the doctors recommended that I get a PEG tube placed in my stomach because I wasn't having enough nutrients, and, you know, my body needed to be strong in order for me to be able to finish radiation. You know, in my head I just thought, no, like, another surgery, you know. And at first I guess I was being stubborn, and at first I was telling the doctors, no, I can do this, I can eat, I can do it, just give me one more chance. But, you know, I was too weak, and at the moment I saw it like a setback, getting that surgery in my stomach. I saw it as a setback, but it was actually what I needed to move forward. And the nurse that was attending me, which was another, I believe, you know, angel sent from heaven, he saw me, and he noticed, and he was there when I was telling the doctors to give me another chance, that I could keep trying to eat. He lifted up his shirt, and he had a big scar, and he told me that, you know, he was a cancer survivor, and that a few years back, you know, he had to get a PEG tube to eat. And, you know, he told me sometimes you have to take 15 steps back in order to move 10 steps forward. And he's like, I know you feel like this means that you're not strong enough, or that you can't take it, but it's not it, you know, you're gonna be okay, this is only temporarily. So, you know, I'm grateful for him too, and I decided to move forward and have the PEG tube surgery done. So I had a PEG tube placed in my stomach, and you know, they were feeding me through the machine. The machine was going very slow, and that's how I was being fed for the remainder of the month of August and the remainder of my treatment, my radiation treatment. So I finished radiation treatment on August 28, 2019. I never forget that date, because it just felt like a victory, you know, that I had made it, that I had survived, that, you know, I had gotten through such a difficult treatment and made it through. So unfortunately I wasn't able to ring the bell like many patients do, because I was in the hospital, And, you know, I didn't get to do that, but, you know, I was just celebrating. I was so happy. I was so grateful for, you know, everything God had done for me, all the miracles He had done for me, because I really felt like there was a point that I felt like I didn't have the strength to keep going, but God gave me the strength. So I am just beyond grateful to have gotten that second chance. And so I finished my radiation. The PEG tube at first, when they were trying to send me home, they were trying to do bolus feed, which is instead of using the machine, they use a syringe to feed me through the tube. But at first, you know, it was like my body was getting adapted to the tube. It was rejecting the bolus feed. I kept throwing up every time they did the bolus feed. So I was in the hospital for the next few weeks trying to adjust to the PEG tube. And on September 12 or 11 of 2019, I was discharged home. And for me, it was just like, this is another victory, another miracle, to be able to go home, you know, because a lot of people don't get to go home. So I was able to go home, but the healing didn't end there. You know, I went home and I recovered from treatment, trying to gain my strength again, doing physical therapy, speech therapy, continuing with my speech, and for you know, working on my voice, on my vocal cords. And then a month later, I had a scan done, and the scan revealed that the tumor was stable, that, you know, the radiation and the chemo that I had done did not, you know, destroy the tumor, the remaining tumor that was there, and that the tumor was just stable. So, you know, some doctors said it didn't work, but I chose to see it as, well, you know, it didn't decrease, it didn't diminish the tumor, but at least it hasn't grown. So I saw it as a positive. So then, you know, I wondered what's going to happen next. The doctor said this was a one-time thing, you know, radiation chemo was a one-time thing. And so I just wondered and I prayed. And as I was recovering, my double vision came back too. And, you know, in that moment, little thoughts of fear started playing in my head. You know, maybe what if it's growing? What if it's, you know, why is my double vision coming back? But this time I said, you know, I'm not going to feed into these fears, into these thoughts. I'm going to pray about it. I've seen what God has done in my life. I see how He, you know, got me through brain surgery, through radiation, through chemo, through many hospital stays, and, you know, through moments where I felt like dying and like nothing more was left in me. And I've seen Him rise me up from that. So I said, I'm not going to focus on the negativity, but instead pray. And this time I said, I have faith and I believe that you're going to continue to heal me. So, you know, a few weeks later, my double vision completely disappeared. And the doctors said that it was probably due to inflammation from the radiation. So, you know, a few weeks later, my double vision disappeared. I started feeling a little bit better. A month, I would say 2 months later, my PEG tube was removed and I started having soft foods. I started slowly, eating puree and more solid foods, and I was starting to see an improvement. It was very minimal improvements, but it was just nice to see that I was progressing and, not moving backwards. And this was November. I got my pipe tube removed, and I'm just thinking, okay, God, what's next? This tumor is stable. I still have this cancer. Thankfully, it's, not growing, but what's next for me? And in early December, I get a call from the chemo oncologist, and he tells me, Sheila, I have great news for you. There's this new study, this new radioactive targeted therapy called Lutathera, and I believe it can help you. So I'm going to refer you to the doctor that's in charge of, performing these treatments. And, my friend, my really good friend, when I mentioned it, he said, it's an early Christmas gift for you. And that's exactly what it was. It was an answered prayer. It was a blessing from God, and it was a gift. It was the greatest gift that I could have received that year. So I went and saw the doctor, and he explained to me this treatment, and it's basically a radioactive treatment. So, but it's given through the veins. So it's like an infusion like chemo, but it doesn't have the side effects of chemo, like losing hair, extreme fatigue, nauseous. So, he told me the only problem is that this treatment has not been approved by the FDA to be used for your type of tumor. This type of treatment has only been approved for endocrine tumors, and it hasn't been approved for, skull base, neck, paraganglioma tumors. So he's like, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a scan. So they did a PET scan to see if I even qualify for this tumor, to see if it lights up. I did the PET scan. The PET scan came back and it did light up. So I did qualify for this for this treatment. But the doctor said, no, we need to reach out to the insurance and see if they can approve this this treatment, because I'm not sure if it'll be approved. But if it's not approved, there's a clinical trial up north that's offering it. So my husband and me, we looked into it, and we looked into the side effects, we looked into it, and I just said, there's nothing to lose. And I just, felt this nudging in my heart, like I needed to move forward with this. So I agreed to do the treatment, and a few weeks later, I received a call from the doctor telling me that the insurance had approved it, and that I would be doing the first treatment in late December. So, obviously I jumped of excitement. I thank God over and over again for allowing me to be able to get this treatment. And the doctors told me that I would be the first one here in South Florida to receive this treatment. So, at this point, yes, there was questions in my mind about the treatment, but I was like ready. I was ready for God to use this medicine and to continue to heal me. So I proceeded, I prepared, and I had my first Lutathera treatment, which is the radioactive treatment, December 27 of 2019. During this treatment, they inject, they prepare you, they put you in a room by yourself because it uses, radiation. So it can be harmful to other people to be exposed to this radiation. So I had the treatment done in a room by myself. There was a nurse monitoring me, and it lasted a whole day. I got there at 8 in the morning, and I was out by like 4:30, 5 p.m. During the treatment, I did get a little nauseous for a few minutes, but aside from that, I only had like a mild headache for a few weeks. After the treatment, I had to be isolated from everybody for 2 weeks, and my family was very supportive and helping me through it all, and I completed the first treatment with Lutathera, and I wrapped up the 2019 year, feeling better, feeling stronger, and feeling like a warrior, feeling like I can finally see some light in the midst of all this darkness, in the midst of all this pain and suffering. So I started 2020, and in 2020 it was 4 Lutathera treatments, and each one is 8 weeks apart. So I had my last Lutathera treatment in June 12th of 2020, and I was able to complete the treatment. My hair started growing back, my hair didn't fall off like chemo. I was able to, start feeling like energized again, started being able to walk more, walk longer distances, and spend time with family, go out with friends. 2020 was a pandemic, so people were indoors, isolated, and during that time I was recovering. I was slowly starting to feel better again, and I finished my last treatment of Lutathera in June of 2020, and then 3 months later they did a PET scan, and the tumor showed that it was stable. And then 3 months later after that, they did another PET scan, and it showed that the tumor had actually diminished, and there was less activity in that area of the skull base and neck. Something that I also didn't mention earlier is when I was first diagnosed, they had found also small nodules in my lung, and when they did the scan, after finishing the Lutathera, the nodules were gone. They were no longer there. So I was just so thankful that the medicine had worked. I know that it had been a long journey of treatments and trials and ups and downs for me, of healing, of crying, of being grateful and thankful, and of growth. But I was just happy to see that the tumor was finally decreasing. Something was actually working, and the activity around the tumor had actually also decreased. So after that, they monitored me, and in 2021, the year 2021, I didn't have any treatments, and I was just monitored every 3 months with scans and MRIs, and each time the tumor showed less and less activity, and it looked smaller. So, we started now in 2022. It's been now 3 years since my diagnosis. I know it's been a long journey of healing. A lot of pain, a lot of suffering, but also a lot of miracles, a lot of blessing, and a lot of growth, and a lot of lessons learned along this path and this journey. So that's my story. I'm feeling better today. I am being monitored. I have my next scans in March of 2022. I still have faith and hope, and know and believe that I will continue to get better, and believe, and it's only up from here. So I pray and I hope that as you heard my story, as you listened to my story, and if you've just been diagnosed with cancer, or this, a paraganglioma or a pheochromocytoma, or you have a loved one that's just been diagnosed, and you may have a lot of questions and doubts and fears. I hope that this video has given you some peace, has answered some questions that you may be having, and has also given you hope to know that in the midst of a cancer diagnosis, that there's still light, and that even though this is a very sad and scary diagnosis, I want you to know that you are not alone. There is a big community of survivors, of warriors, of thrivers out there. And if you've been diagnosed with a pheochromocytoma or paraganglioma, I'm going to put a link in the description. I have a blog post where I've created a resource guide of all the organizations that advocate and provide resources and support and help to paraganglioma and pheochromocytoma patients. And you can find, I've also, in that resource guide, I also listed all the doctors that treated me, and the surgeons that did my surgery. And I want you to know that your story may be very similar to mine, or it may be different. Maybe it didn't take you this long to get diagnosed, or maybe it's taken you, I know that there's people that have taken them years and years to receive a diagnosis. But I just want you to know that your story is unique, your journey is unique, and as you hear my story, I don't want you to compare yourself to me, because everybody's journey is different. And I know that at first, when I was going through this, I was comparing myself to other patients, and when things didn't go as I thought, I got frustrated and sad and wondered, why am I going through this and other people are not. But just know that your journey, your story, God's plan for your life is unique, and God has great plans for you. And I want you to know that you are not alone, that you will get through this, that you can conquer this, and that you can thrive, not just survive, but you can thrive past a cancer diagnosis. So I hope that this video can inspire you, inspire your loved ones, and just give you hope if you are feeling down or depressed or overwhelmed or scared. I hope that as you read my story, or as you listen to my story, you're able to see that there's hope in all of this. If you have any questions or you want to get in contact with me, I have a blog post. You can put your comments. I'm happy to respond to your comments. If you have any questions about this diagnosis, And I also have a blog where I share my journey, I share pictures, resources too for cancer patients, and I'll put the link in the description. All right, so thank you for listening. Thank you for hearing my story. I know it's a long story, and I apologize for the length of this video, but I just hope that, you know, your hearts can be filled with peace, strength, and hope. Thank you.